And with that, friends, we welcome you back once again to OGP on a Wednesday, midweek. Why? Because that's what we do here. And it's Adam Armbrecht, as always, with Andy Makowitz, healthy, wealthy, wise, and streamlined in the morning. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Adam. New morning routine. I don't let my 18-month old dictate how I act in the morning. I set an alarm like an adult now. I'm waking up at 6:15, 6:30. I'm 2 cold brew coffees in already, and I am fired up about the draft.
Now, here's a guy that's not being impacted by his 18-month-old kid and choosing to set his alarm aggressively earlier so that he can prepare for his 18-month-old kid. That's a good combination. I like your style. We come in off of the press conference yesterday by Dave Gettleman, really for the most part focused on free agency, or was supposed to. They still got some, draft tidbits or possibilities out of them too, but they're going to come in and talk about the draft down the road as well. Let's start there. Dave Gettleman, press conference, takeaways. Listen, the off the bat thing, just to move past this, because there's some other, I think, more interesting notes. The big signings, like bringing back Leonard Williams, like Kenny Golladay, like Adoree Jackson. His general takeaway, Dave Gettleman, was these are, high quality talents that we wanted to get at. Now, he said at great prices. We can debate that. You know what I mean?
Where is he shopping normally when he goes for groceries, right?
Right. Are you? Yeah. I mean, listen, are you in Wegmans? Are you in Aldi's? Are you in Whole Foods? There's different price points for depending on what product you're trying to purchase here. So that being the case, Dave Gettleman has a taste for caviar, we could say, and that's why he was willing to pay those price tags. We could start there if you want, but beyond that, what else did you get out of this press conference?
Well, I think first and foremost, the Giants knew that they were going to be aggressive in free agency, which is what they were, and we'll get into some of that in a minute. The other piece of it was, Gettleman and Abrams basically came out and said, we wanted to pay for top talent. We went for the best talent that was out there on the board. Kenny Golladay was considered the best wide receiver that was on the board. The Giants went up and paid for the best type of talent. Adoree Jackson gets on the market. He was the best young free agent corner that hit the market. The Giants paid up to get him. Leonard Williams, even though he was one of our own, was potentially a free agent. The Giants paid up to get the best young defensive lineman. So that the Giants made a conscious decision to say, we are going to pay up for premier players that are going to hit the market. We're not going to overpay for a middle tier type of guy just to fill a roster spot, which I think is a good approach. Like, spend the money on high end talent. Don't just consistently slightly overpay for talent that just fills a hole or fills a void.
Yeah, even when you think about not even free agency, but when they made the trade for Ogletree to bring him in, right? You paid a premium in draft assets to bring in a player because you had a hole, you had this need, and you also kind of knew we're overpaying for what we're going to get in return. I think if you are going to invest big dollars in free agency, to your point, 3, and you include Leonard Williams in that, 3 really big name players. We're going to get into his comments around Kyle Rudolph as well, as opposed to, we signed 6, and we signed other players in free agency, but we signed 6 or 7, C plus B level players, and we paid a little bit extra on every single one of them. It adds up into saying, what about the big name guys? What about the true number 1 talent at wide receiver? So listen, nobody is going to complain about what the Giants and Dave Gettleman did in free agency overall. And before we get to we'll get to Kyle Rudolph, because I thought it was the comments were interesting there as well. But do you want to take, all the time in the world here, how long the podcast runs. If you need to apologize to Devontae Booker, feel free. Now's the time, because I think once Dave broke it down for you, you really have a better sense of the value of this player and why he was so worth that price in free agency.
Yeah, so kudos to Dave Gettleman. He comes out and one of the first questions asked by the media, of course, is essentially, why did you overpay for Devontae Booker? Right?
Everybody wants to know.
Like, everyone's raising their hand. Like, he's like, not all at once, not all at once. Everyone's raising their hand.
Kenny Golladay question was a Adoree Jackson question.
Anyone have questions
Leonard
about?
Williams, no.
Daniel Jones offseason workouts. No. You want to know why I overpaid at the beginning of free agency for a backup running back after I spent the number 2 pick on the all-world, green jacket running back? Oh, okay. Well, Dave Gettleman came out and his answer was Devontae Booker is a 3-down back, so he can play every single snap if we need him to. It's insurance behind Saquon Barkley, especially knowing Saquon Barkley has had injury history. He wanted to have a back behind Saquon Barkley that can fill the void should Saquon not be able to perform, but also complement him, whether it's in the pass game or the run game, and give him a spell. So I will say, Dave Gettleman spun that really, really well. He said you can never have too many good players, period, at one position, period, right? But he didn't say you can never have too many good players at one position, even if you overpay for the backup guy, which I thought was a nice omission. But I mean, what's Gettleman supposed to say? He's not going to come out and be like, you know what? We significantly overpaid for a backup running back, but that was at the beginning of free agency before I hit it out of the park.
Like, right. Well, yeah. In hindsight being what it is, I might have done it different, but again, I think that this, like, what I do think is accurate about it is wanting to have a 3-down running back that you can have in there all the time. The question becomes, what other 3-down running backs, veteran running backs, maybe we're going to still be on the market or still are on the market at this very moment. That being the case, though, I stand by. You liked the guy, you wanted the guy, you went and you got him, and you were aggressive in free agency across the board. No stops, full gas, no stops. One other note that I took away from it was the Kyle Rudolph conversation. So the media, asked Dave Gettleman, once you had the issue come up for Kyle Rudolph and you knew he was going to need surgery, why not go back to the table? Why not try to make it a more team-friendly deal? Why not make it more, incentive-laden, has to meet certain check marks, play a certain number of games? And Gettleman basically said, and it was after, I think, the money man was, explained it, the nuts and bolts of it. And then Dave kind of leaned in and said, plus, we're classy. You know what I mean? We do it right around here. You guys, you feel me? And by the way, I like the sentiment of what he's like. I do like what he's saying. Like, hey, you offered the guy a contract. He cleared the medical, and then this came up on the back end of it. So to try to retroactively save yourself a couple bucks, or nickel and dime somebody, or take the offer off the table, no, that wouldn't feel classy, or it wouldn't feel like a handshake agreement that you had reached. I also I think we all agree, when the injury news came out about Kyle Rudolph, we all took a pause and was like, or maybe we don't want to sign him. I don't think that was the make or break signing, obviously, that really moves the needle. If he's healthy, we like him and we like what he brings to the tight end room. But that was just kind of, I don't know. It's, it's like big D power from Dave Gettleman. It's like, we're classy. We don't, what are we going to do? Knock it off, guy.
He's sitting in New Jersey. He's sitting by the Meadowlands. It felt very Sopranos-esque. Like, we keep it in the family here, right? Yeah. Like, he basically, Adam, I actually thought this was really smart. So it's a little bit old school mentality of Dave Gettleman. Like, we're a blue blood. We're the New York Football Giants. Like, this is how we run things here. But I think what he was doing is, let's say the Kyle Rudolph thing, they could have gone back and maybe applied a little pressure to him and said, hey, come on, like, we got to restructure this a little differently. There's injury risks here. One, it potentially makes Kyle Rudolph go look elsewhere to see, like, I'm sure someone will give me the deal that I'm looking for. That's one. The second piece of it is, even if the Giants would have saved $500,000 or changed the structure of the deal, it's signaling to all other free agents that potentially come on the market, like, we treat people right here. We do the right thing. You want to come here because we will honor the things that we say and do. When you look in like other sports, and you look at JJ Redick, who was on the New Orleans Pelicans, got traded to the Mavericks. He's like, yeah, they told me I wasn't going to get traded, looked at me in my face, and then they just shipped me to Dallas like yesterday, right? Like, Gettleman is basically saying, I will always shoot you straight. And if you shoot me straight and we're on the same page, like, we'll always back you up. We'll always support you. I think it's great. And it basically signals to all free agents, like, we're a spot you want to go.
And it is funny, too, because I want to get into some of the draft kind of tidbits out of it and thoughts and rumors that are flying around now as we're just over a week away. But I think sometimes it can feel clunky, or sometimes it can seem a little odd or humorous that Dave Gettleman has been at the helm for some of the weird times for the Giants. But one component we've always come back to, and this goes to John Mara as well, right? The Giants organization, they're one of the originals. They're the stalwarts. They're the blue chip franchise in the NFL. And you haven't been able to hang your hat on that the last handful of years, not just because of the record or the performance on the field, but also because of some of the contract things or some of the players you weren't able to attract there. So it may, to your point, I take or leave it. I mostly chuckle. And also, I think reestablishing what you want the Giants organization to be in the NFL is important. It's a culture shift under Joe Judge primarily, and we've seen that, and it continues to happen. So it's a positive thing overall. It's usually just it's the messenger. If Joe Judge had said those exact same words, I would have been like, oh my God, this guy pulling on my heart rate. You know what I mean? Where do you want me to run, Joe? Where's the wall to run through? But Dave Gettleman, I'm just wondering what he was doing at 2:45 in the afternoon. Possibly he was in Florida. They had to ship him in just to get him to this press conference. All right. The other thing that I want to get to, though, is the New York Giants coming into the NFL draft. I was talking to you before we started. I ran a couple of mock drafts for Michael, who a fan over on YouTube, walking through the idea of packaging up to get back into the second round a second time, maybe target a specific player. I've talked about packaging to get up into the back of the first round and make sure that you get offensive line and your edge rusher as you need it. So condensing those picks and getting as much value as you can out of the draft. But some rumors, some speculation in this season of smoke suggest the Giants possibly could be looking to trade up next Thursday. Well, explain to me what the logic is behind a move like this, given that the Giants are at 11. Who's the target that you're trying to get to? Who are you afraid of missing out on? And how confident are you in selling off more assets and leaving yourself pretty bare for the remainder of the draft?
Yeah, so once I heard a little bit of smoke around potentially the Giants trading up, I'm like, oh, this actually makes sense. And I didn't think I was going to say that, but then I started putting some of the pieces together. One, Dave Gettleman has never traded down ever in his 8-year career as a GM. So like he doesn't have a track record of trading down. He has a track record of trading up and identifying a player that he really wants for good or bad, sickness or health. Death do us part. Dave Gettleman loves trading up. That made me start thinking, okay, well, if the Giants are trading up, what are the reasons? One of the reasons I'm hearing is because they want to get in front of the Dallas Cowboys. There may be a player that could still be on the board at anywhere between 6 and 9 that they don't want a generational type talent to fall to the Cowboys in the division. Makes complete sense to me. Now, where I'm trying to figure this out is what is the player or players or pool of players that the Giants would be moving up to in order to make this happen? And is it worth the draft capital that you'd be spending on the back end?
Yeah, so the quick first thing that comes to mind here, and I know because you have some things to back up the possible moves to make in that regard. The only guy that I could think about would be Kyle Pitts, and he's not going to be there at 10. He's the only guy that I look at the top of this draft that I think reasonably could come. I can't be doing this for a wide receiver because as good as any of these guys might be, they're not generational talents. And I don't think I'd be doing it even for Slater, who I really like and plugs in perfectly for the Giants. I don't think he's generational worthy that you need to package and get up above the Cowboys for. Maybe the last one would be, we talk about guys the Giants like, Micah Parsons, because beyond that, a cornerback? We're not in that market right now. Offensive lineman, Sewell, if he fell there for some reason, but who are the names that are going to be there that line up with what the Giants would need or want and are being regarded in that way? Kyle Pitts is the only guy that gets talked about, outside of quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence. He's the only guy that gets talked about as being a generational, once in a decade kind of guy to go get.
So I think there's 3 names that it would make sense for the Giants if they have these players ranked as high as they do potentially on their board. One is Kyle Pitts, to your point, because he's such a dynamic playmaker. Evan Ingram is on his 5th year option. He may not be around long term. Kyle Pitts could be a great replacement piece there. That's one. 2 is Penei Sewell, where most people think that he is going to the Bengals at 5 because they keep sending pictures of Joe Burrow's ACL torn, like with all the stitching on it. They're like, how about we protect this guy? Like maybe we'll throw a lineman his way. But what
Joe Burrow sends back a picture of his buddy Jamar Chase from college, and he's like, "Yeah, but nobody protects me better than my boy on the outside."
Right. So the third guy that the Giants could trade up for is Jamar Chase. Like it sounds like people are saying that Jamar Chase is head and shoulders the best wide receiver in this draft. They're saying he would have been the best wide receiver in last year's draft. So when you're talking about those 3 guys, you're talking about a generational tight end / playmaker. We're talking about a wide receiver, and we're talking about an offensive tackle. Now, Adam, I'll give you a couple of different scenarios. Those are 3. maybe I'll just toss it to you. Does any of them just like absolutely, you're like, absolutely not, I don't want it anywhere near this?
Oh no, listen, I'm fine with all of them. I mean, listen, a guy like Sewell, it presents you the question mark of left tackle because that's where he's going to, you start thinking about Thomas. Now you just took him at 4th overall, but you have 2 bookends. That's great. The only other thing I think would be to say that the Dallas Cowboys, I don't believe at this stage would be in the market for a Jamar Chase. So if that was the player that was falling, I don't know that you'd have to get above Dallas to beat him to it. But no, all those talents are good. And Jamar Chase is the wide receiver that, for everything I've said, I would jump at the chance to take him in the 1st round.
Okay, so under these scenarios, let's just say the Giants do trade up because we've been talking about trade downs ad nauseum at 11. Let's talk about trade ups. There's 2 real areas where teams are waving a flag right now saying, I would potentially move out of this pick. We obviously have Atlanta. 4 seems way too far for the Giants to go. So really it's the Dolphins at 6 and the Carolina Panthers. There's a report out yesterday saying they want out of the 8 spot. They're looking to see if they can acquire assets because they don't need a quarterback anymore because they got Sam Darnold. So now they're saying, how can we accumulate some of these draft picks knowing that we don't necessarily need that type of player at 8? Now, here is kind of the capital that it would take. For the Giants to move from 11 to 6, it would be the equivalent of a mid to late round, 2nd round pick. So you basically would say the Giants would be giving up probably their pick number 42.
And maybe getting something back in return because it means a little bit high.
Maybe, but who knows?
Or something, right?
Supply and demand. I don't know, but really, when you look at it, that would be the type of asset you would have to give up.
Okay.
When you want to move from 11 to 8 and take the Carolina Panthers pick, get in front of the Broncos and the Cowboys, you're talking about a late 3rd round pick is the going rate for moving up 3 spots in that position, which 76 is a little bit of an early 3rd round pick. So maybe it could be a 4th and a 4th next year or something like that for the Giants to be able to do it. Are either of those cost prohibitive if the Giants look and they say, okay, Kyle Pitts is there at 6. We love this guy as a talent. Are we willing to give up our 2nd round pick to get Pitts and then figure it out later?
Well, what becomes interesting about it is, and this will tie back into the press conference, one of the things that Gettleman talked about was O'Shane Ximenez and Lorenzo Carter and being disappointed, not in them, but in the injuries that kept them off the field. Said that they're rehabbing, they're coming along, and they're excited. He thinks that they're going to progress and get better. And this is all in regards to getting better at the edge. He thinks that Cam Brown, that Carter Coughlin, these guys are going to get better. That doesn't mean this is all in the vein of you're sitting there in the room and you're trying to make this trade up and you want to convince yourself. You still need edge rusher. That's still a glaring need. If you're going up to 6 and giving up the 2nd round pick, you're in a bit of a bind there because you're talking about now we have the 3rd round pick and our 4th round pick. At that point, you double down and you say, now we trade up again to go get an edge rusher in the top of the 2nd round somewhere or our offensive lineman that we need and make sure that we're checking a couple of these boxes. It comes down to how you feel about those 2 positions and if you think you need to get a high quality talent. That would seem a little rich. But to 8, though, that if you could pull that off for the 11th and 2 fourths, like you said, right? 4th this year, 4th next year. And you want to go get, by the way, Kyle Pitts, at 8 because he's fallen there. And any of those 3 guys, honestly, if you really, Chase would be like the last one just because, again, where we are with our wide receiver room. But if you want to make that move up, that doesn't hurt you that much, right? At 42, you can still get a quality offensive lineman. At 76, you can still get a contributing edge rusher, vice versa. Run them how you want to. So there's some value. There's some real value there. And if it was for Kyle Pitts, obviously, I think most Giants fans would jump at the opportunity, especially the ones that want a wide receiver in the 1st round. Hey, here's your golden ticket. The guy that everyone agrees is generational. We're going to go get him and then build from there.
Yeah. I'm of the same mindset as you where, even if it is potentially the 3rd round pick to be able to move up, I would still consider it if one of those guys that you've identified is there. I think that 2nd round pick, if you're going to do this, has to be an edge rusher, has to be an offensive lineman, depending on what player you're targeting with that trade up. Yeah. But, when you think about it, Adam, this is a realistic situation for the Giants that they could fall into. I am extremely confident that 4 quarterbacks are going to go in the first 8 picks. Like I'm 50-50 on whether 5 quarterbacks are going to go within the first 8 picks. So even if we say 4 quarterbacks are going in the first 8 picks. That means that between Pitts, Sewell, Slater, Chase, like one of those guys has to be there. And some people say that they have Slater ranked as high as Sewell. Like one of those guys will be there no matter what. If you're saying, you know, Mac Jones or whoever is gonna be in that top 5 picks as well, then you're saying one of those 3 that I described to you, Pitts, Chase, or Sewell, has to be there at 8. And so this is a realistic expectation for the Giants. And the reason why I also think that this is interesting is I read some things that are like, oh, the Giants have the second least amount of picks in this draft with 6 picks. You know, Seattle has 3 picks because they traded everything for Jamal Adams. But the value of the Giants picks is actually like 13th or 14th in terms of the value of the assets that they have. And we talked about this at length, the 53-man roster. Like, there's not that many holes. The Giants have glaring holes in the offensive line and at edge rusher. But outside of that, there's not too much room at the end to like accumulate a bunch more 6th and 7th round picks because these guys aren't going to make the roster. So for me, I'm like, what if we go up and get the type of generational talent that one of these guys might be for the Giants? Like, imagine Sewell falls to 8 and the Giants give up a 3rd round pick. And now we've got a generational type of tackle to solidify that offensive line. Like, I'd be high-fiving at that point.
The interesting thing about that, because that's the point that I was going to get to, was it depending on who it is, right? I mean, listen, Jamar Chase, again, I look at him as a clear cut above these other wide receivers in this class, and that's fantastic. I still stand with the idea of wide receiver in the first round isn't what you need to be doing here. But if it's Sewell, it does become a little bit delicate, right? You just spent the 4th overall pick last year on what you wanted to be your stud starting left tackle for your team. And now you're going to go get Sewell, who is a starting left tackle for your team. Now, we talked about it a couple episodes ago. Could you have Thomas kick over to right tackle and start playing there? Theoretically, as I've said before, NFL teams just want the bookends. They don't care about if it's left or right. They just want quality at the end of the line. So if you can accomplish that and it makes sense, great. And you look at it as just last 2 drafts, we took 2 starting offensive tackles that we believe in. That's fine. And then you get into maybe Pert kicking inside to guard. If that second piece around Pert was a reality that the Giants could accomplish, then the trade up is even more palatable, because what you're saying is in the 2nd round, we're going to want to go get our edge rusher, and there's going to be good names out there. Maybe, not going to happen, but maybe Owe were to slip a little bit. But Joseph Osai is certainly a targetable guy. Perkins is there around the top end of that 2nd round as well. So there's options there, and you don't have to worry about offensive line now. So now when you get into the 3rd round, you know, you can still do something there as well on either side of the ball, really, and ultimately come to 4 or 5 players in the draft class, right? And that's what we've talked about, 4 or 5 players. Those mocks, by the way, that I ran trading up into the 1st back end or up into the 2nd, got 4 players in the trade up to the 2nd round because of what it costs to move, 5 in the trade up to the 1st round. And that's about maxed out. You feel good, and you feel good about getting high quality players, right? Quality over quantity.
The one thing, you know, also your boy Tryon from Washington may even be there.
Yeah.
You love him. He might be there to be able to address the edge rusher in the 2nd round. Adam, the thing I keep going back to about this, and people are like, oh, we're stunting Matt Pert's growth. Oh, Nate Solder's backing him up. We have all these people at these different positions. No one said anything about Darnay Holmes when we signed Adoree Jackson, right? Like, Adoree Jackson's out there. We spent $13 million on him, but we're like, well, what about the growth of 4th round pick Darnay Holmes? Like, we spent draft capital on Darnay. He's supposed to be a cornerback. Like, why can't we do this? It's like, I just want to get better. And if that makes our depth significantly stronger, that's what I want. Darnay Holmes was not necessarily ready yet to be a number 2 cornerback. He projects as kind of a slot guy, right? Like that's what we established.
That's what I was going to say was the only difference there being here's your slot cornerback as opposed to your outside cornerback, right? That's a slight difference in terms of positional value because these are 2 different spots. Again, if Sewell was a pure right tackle, even a right tackle, I'd say, worth it to move up for a right tackle? Of course it is. I'm not worried about 3rd round Matt Pert. And to your point about his development, this is about quality, quality of the player that you're getting there on the roster. So the positions are interesting too. But your point is well taken in the sense that I want to get better. If there's opportunities to get better, that's the ultimate name of the game. Now, fans, you and I, coming into this offseason debating Dave Gettleman's acumen and ability and what has he accomplished. Things like this, depending on who you move for and who you take, the totality of his time with the New York Football Giants, you're going to look back at a lot of draft classes and go, well, remember when we took Thomas? We were all really excited. But the next year we took Pert. And that's when we really got excited. Remember that time when we signed this player here, we drafted Darnay Holmes. We thought he was developing nicely, but then we got a Dory Jackson. So, 2-3 years from now, when you look at these draft classes, and that includes Ocean Jimenez and Lorenzo Carter, right? These are guys that you're going to look back and say, are they here or not here? There could be very hollow draft classes on Dave Gettleman's resume, on the Giants' resume. Now, ultimately, if the Giants become a good team, I'm not really concerned about the way that we got to that point, but it would make the case that much more stronger that, yes, you may become a better team and it took you 5 years. It should have taken you 3.
Well, right. Well, and I just keep thinking about, you have guys like Cam Brown and Carter Coughlin that are on the roster right now. And like we said, the roster is gonna kind of thin out towards the back. If we're in the 6th round, we have 2 6th-round picks. If we're drafting another linebacker, that means either that linebacker is not going to make the roster, or Cam Brown, Carter Coughlin, any of those guys that were picked later aren't making the roster. When you think about the 6 picks that we have, I am fairly confident that the Giants will at least allocate 3 of them to offensive line, edge rush / outside linebacker, and wide receiver. Like, those are 3 of the 6 picks that are going to happen. So there's not that much more that the Giants are going to do. It's just the order of how we do this. And to me, if you address offensive line at the top of the draft and you get a playmaker like Pitts or whatever you want to do there, I'm fine with it. As long as we address those needs and you've identified the player that you think fits those needs the best, I don't really care. I mean, I've heard people say, drop back from 11 to 20, pick up a 2nd-round pick from the Bears, get your edge rusher there, trade back into the 1st round, get your wide receiver or your offensive lineman, and then go do it that way. I'm fine with any of these if there's particular players that you've identified that you like. But man, some of these guys at the top of the draft, you watch Kyle Pitts highlights, you watch Sewell, like, it would be nice to get one of these guys at the top and just like premium position, much like Dave Gettleman's free agency situation. We go pay for the premium players and the premium assets. We don't overpay for the middle of the road edge rusher that doesn't fit at 11. And I'm loving that strategy, Adam.
Well, yeah, and by the way, I mean, this is why, the trade down, because it's like top 10 or 12 talents in this draft are where the premium talent is. And, around 10 or 11-ish is when you start to shift a little bit. There's been a lot of those conversations around the edge rushers and where's their true value, closer to 20 than to 10. So when you're at 11, if edge rusher is the first thing on your board, even over offensive line for Dave Gettleman and the Giants, it's hard to take a guy at 11 and not look at those trade down opportunities. That's why even when you talk about, don't worry about trading down from 11. Look to come up back into the 1st round. Look to come up back into the 2nd round and make sure you target some of those high caliber talents that you speak of. But listen, show me the Giants fan. At the end of the day, show me the Giants fan that on draft night Thursday, you hear the Carolina Panthers are on the clock, and as Goodell walks to the podium in his basement or wherever he's going to be this year and says, there's been a trade. The Giants have traded with the Carolina Panthers and select Kyle Pitts, select Penny Sewell, even whether, how I would feel, select Jamar Chase. There's not a Giants fan that's going to be unhappy with that.
Come on, you got to be fired up. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Like, Giants walk in, they make the big splurge, they go identify the top talent in the draft, and they go get them, and everyone gets fired up. Everyone goes nuts. Dave Gettleman gets carried off on his shoulders down the Jersey Turnpike, right?
To death in rush hour. Well, there you go, friends. Dream a little dream. Andy Makowitz has just painted a picture for you about what we could all be envisioning just 1 week and 1 day away from today. You can, of course, follow us on YouTube where we're doing some mock drafts. I'm sneaking out of the podcast studio from Andy to make sure I get those out there to people. People want them, Andy. I can't let down the people. And of course, on social media at One Giant Podcast as well. Before we go, though, no matter what time of year it is, no matter what the Giants may trade for, Andy Makowitz always wants, always needs, demands that
As always, Adam, let's go Big Blue.
Yes, sir.